Hey everyone, welcome to Cross the Ditch NC. My name is Laura and I'm so glad you're here today. Today is another installment of a tip of the day. Today's tip is on blossom end rot in tomatoes. It is something that everyone is going to deal with in their garden at some point in time, and I want to show you an easy trick that I use to combat blossom end rot. So exactly what is blossom end rot? Blossom end rot is when the blossom end of your tomato, so the bottom of it, not the part that's connected to the vine, but the bottom of it, starts to turn brown and mushy and starts to essentially rot. It's caused by a lack of calcium in the soil. So if you have had a lot of dry weather recently and you haven't been watering your tomatoes regularly, it could have a calcium intake issue. So there may be sufficient calcium in the soil, but if there's not enough water to essentially feed the tomato the nutrients that it needs, because just like us, it gets its nutrients from what it takes in, and it takes in its nutrients through its roots, through the water, then the calcium isn't reaching the tomato itself. So then the tomato end, the blossom end, will begin to rot out. Or it could be just simply caused by a calcium deficiency in your soil. So how can you fix this? Well, one is using a well-balanced fertilizer. Sorry, there's a lot of gnats out here. Use a well-balanced fertilizer when you plant your tomatoes, and then making sure they stay fairly hydrated with water, obviously, throughout the season, but don't overwater them. Just make sure they stay sufficiently hydrated. And then if you still notice that you are getting rotten ends on your tomatoes, then you can add calcium to your soil through using a fertilizer that has the calcium in it, or you can do the thing that I do, which is using Tums. So I actually wanted to show you an example of what blossom end rot looks like. And the other day, this is what triggered me to make this video. I found a tomato on my plant that had blossom end rot, and I said, oh, time to start putting calcium in my soil, because I grow my tomatoes in containers, and so the tomatoes use the nutrients up in that soil pretty quickly, so I have to add fertilizer to it throughout the season. However, I pulled that tomato that had the blossom end rot off, figuring, oh, I'll have some more before long, and I can't find any with it, which that's a good thing, but unfortunately now I can't show you an example of it. But what I mean by the blossom end of the tomato, so you have your tomatoes hanging on the vine, so the bottom end, this is where the flower was at, and the tomato grew out from there. The bottom of this is not rot, but the bottom of this, you'll see this whole area right here start turning brown and getting mushy. If that happens, you have blossom end rot. So you just want to add calcium to your soil and make sure your tomatoes have plenty of water. So like I said, you can add calcium to the soil by buying like a calcium-based fertilizer from the store. You can find those at most garden centers and big box stores, farm supply stores, or you can do what I do. I've done this for many years now. It works really well. I buy Tums. This is, I guess you could say, like antacids. This is the store brand. I do not buy name brand, simply because it's a lot cheaper. I can get this big old container with 100 tablets in it for, I think there's 160 tablets in it for the same price that I can get a small container of the name brand. So all I do is I take my Tums and I put them into a Ziploc bag. And I'm going to do this whole bottle, because with as many tomato plants as I have, we'll use this whole bottle. All right, make sure I put this with recycling, leave that out, and then just seal up my bottle, pushing the air out of it. And then here you have several options. You can stomp on them, you can use a rolling pin, or you can use a hammer, meat tenderizer, whatever you want to use. And you just want to simply break them up. You want to get them as close to a powder form as you possibly can. And be sure that when you're doing this, you flip your bag over and break up the other side as well. All right, so there's my cup. These pieces are a little bit too big, so I'm gonna set them to the side. Stuff falling all over. It's okay if they're like small and broken up, kind of like that. I don't know how well you can see it. That's fine, but if they're like halves and quarters, they're still too big. You want to pull those out and finish breaking those up a little bit more, because it's ideal to have it small like that, almost like a powder. I'm gonna break these up real quick. My bag got holes in it. There we go. All right, so next thing, all you have to do is sprinkle these into your soil, just at the top of the soil, close to the stem where the root is, and then just kind of work it in. You can use your fingers to work it in. You can use like a little trowel or a little claw, little rake to work it into the soil, and then just water it in really well. And then you should see your issues with blossom end rot resolve itself. You still might have a tomato here and there that has it. I do, but usually I don't have a lot of it once I add the tums to my soil. My tomatoes are a little thirsty. It was a rather warm day today, so, and because they're in containers and they're on the south facing side of my house, they get a lot of heat and sun during the afternoons, and so I have to make sure I water them really good when I get home. But you just put a little bit in each one, and then take your fingers and just kind of work it into the soil just a little bit. You don't have to be deep, just kind of get it into the soil. That leaves in the way. And it don't have to be perfect. Just work it into the soil, and then give them a good water, which they'll probably need anyway. And then they'll start uptaking that calcium, and hopefully you will see an end to, or at least a dramatic decrease in any blossom end rot issues you may have. Yeah, a little tomato. Oh, hey y'all, how about that? I didn't even check this one. There you go. That has end rot on it. There you go. Now you see it. Go ahead and pull this guy off. That's my blossom end rot on my tomato. So yeah, finally got to show you an example of it. So on that plant, that's the same one that I did find one on earlier, or the other day. So definitely have a moisture and a calcium issue with this one. So with those tums in there, we shouldn't have an issue anymore, or at least not much of one. Well, that is it for today's tip of the day. I hope that helps you with your blossom end rot problems that you may be having in the garden. And if you don't have them this year, consider yourself lucky. It's really not a bad thing to deal with. It's very easy to fix. Just throw some extra calcium in the soil, make sure you're watering regularly, and you shouldn't have many, if any, issues with it. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you come back to see me again, and I hope you have a blessed day.